One, go. Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer, and this is Strange Mosaic, and we have a new guest today that I'm very excited about. He is an expert on the subject of mind control and has been studying the dark art and its application by military and government intelligence agencies across the globe for many years. He is well known for the books he's written on Charles Manson and mind control, and has also done extensive work on Cambridge Analytica and all of the scandalous behavior around it. I think that is a topic that most people either don't understand or choose to ignore because it doesn't suit their narrative. So here to explain to us why that is the cause of what we are experiencing right now, Neil Sanders, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me on.
Absolutely. So my friend Elisa, she's written books on mind control, Our Life Beyond MK Ultra. And she ends every email to me with the quote, or to everyone really, from, I had it written down somewhere a second ago. I don't know, the US intelligence guy who said, "We will know our disinformation campaign is complete when everything the American people believe is a lie." And we're there, right?
Pretty much.
And, you know, it seems like there's, you know, a separate set of mind control programs for the various different factions. You know, one particularly works well on individuals who lean more left, one on individuals that lean more right, and then one that tends to seem like they're questioning authority, but ultimately, are they really questioning authority? And it seems like all of those programs are in full swing and operating at maximum capacity right now. And almost everybody seems to be falling into place with the program that was designed for them. And I think in our community, you know, at this point, like sometimes I don't feel a member of any of it in any way, which might be a good thing. It seems that like there are threads of information that people choose to ignore, right? For how much time is spent tearing apart certain threads of information, there are others that, you know, that are ignored. And I think your work on Cambridge Analytica is one of them. You know, because it's not convenient for people who like to say that, you know, everything is, you know, everything we're experiencing is a machination of the totalitarian left, and, you know, with government at the core of it. So can you, like, maybe in a way that's a little bit more designed for these people in our community than the standard public, explain to them why they are under Cambridge Analytica mind control?
Well, okay, right. Well, the thing is that basically the sort of, one of the things that people don't really sort of get, and this is bizarre, is that people have sort of picked up on the news media and, you know, the print media and stuff like that, and they're very good at sort of picking it apart and seeing through the propaganda aspect of it. You know, they'll say perhaps like, well, the headline doesn't match the text or something like that. So when it's in that kind of sort of arena, for some reason, people are pretty sort of on it with that. I think that because I know it's not massively new and people sort of use it all the time, but social media and the internet has really made people let their guard down for some reason, to the point where they don't apply the same standards of, you know, checking, really fact checking and stuff like that, in order to sort of get this, you know, get to the crux of what the actual story is. And what we've got at the minute is you've got intelligence agencies, and not just intelligence agencies, but that sort of military industrial complex type thing, where the, you know, the connections to sort of big business and stuff like that, that have kind of hijacked certain narratives, and that's kind of where the sort of the mind control aspect is at the minute. Basically, it's not really sort of it's selling narratives. Basically, it's getting in there before you've even started it, and selling the story to you. It's actually not sort of that new. Like there's a guy called Walter Lippmann who was writing in the 20s, and what he suggested doing in order to so that the elites could basically run society, because, you know, normal people, bless them, they haven't got the capacity to be doing this sort of thing. This is what they felt, or this is the justification for their sort of ideology. They felt that people other than the very sort of top echelon shouldn't be involved in any decision making, and they should really just be passive observers. And so basically that's kind of what's happening now, is that basically they're painting the pictures in your head so that you have the understanding of something before you even have a personal experience with it. And what he said was basically like, The example he used was, if somebody picks up a piece of metal that looks like gold, you'll react as if you've found gold. You won't, it's not until basically you take it to the jewelers or whatever, and they say, oh, I'm sorry, this is fool's gold, that your reality would change, because basically this is what your expectation is. And it ties in with this concept called mimetic warfare, which is, again, it's the idea of painting very broad strokes and very broad pictures, and getting people involved in narratives at a sort of ground floor level, so that they get involved. And it's a tactic that's, again, people in the alternative media will be able to notice this in sort of music and stuff like that. So when an artist comes out and apparently they are organic, but everybody sort of was directed to them on Spotify or on whatever, on iTunes or whatever at the same time, we can take a step back and go, hang on, this is not what it's purporting to be. This is a very, very clever marketing scheme that involves you. But that's how I'd like to say artists at the minute, like, I don't know, Lil Pump and stuff like that. That's how they became very, very popular, because they were marketed to a demographic in a way that basically it felt like you were discovering this, and it felt like you were, this is something that's before you. It's not for these people. These people don't get it. They're not, it's not on their level. Their wavelength is off. This is for you who are slightly different, who's just a bit sort of off the beaten track. Like, this is for you, and you have cleverly found this. And the cruel thing is that basically this is a marketing technique. It's basically there so that you feel ownership of this. And as I say, we can see this in the news media when people, for example, there's a story advertising a product, and it's like, oh, this product saved my life. It's like, oh, come on, that's been placed there by an advertising company. Or, you know, we can see it with music or with film, say, when two stars of a film start a romance. I mean, it's like, oh, come on, this is just window dressing to sell the story. For some reason, we're not applying that same level of scrutiny to narratives that are coming through the alternative media. And I think this has started quite a long time ago. And I'll give you an example, right? Virginia Tech and Columbine, those terrible shootings, right? There was quite a lot of information that came out of that really, even under scrutiny, doesn't mash with the official story. Don't know what happened there, but, you know, there was, for example, in Columbine, there was like reports of military grade sort of hardware and stuff like that in the bombs that were there, and reports of potentially other people, and you know, all of this can't be dismissed as confusion. There's something weird went on there. Okay.
Yeah.
Same thing with Virginia Tech. There was something quite strange, horrible tragedy, and, you know, like, it doesn't take away from that. But basically, a lot of people, there were a lot of eyes on that, and that was really sort of at this sort of like inception of everyone being on the internet, of everyone sort of like sharing files and stuff like that. I think it's pre-YouTube basically. But, and then what was the next one that came out? Okay, the next one, the next thing, the big thing that came out was Sandy Hook, which is horrific and terrible and just monstrous. And what immediately flooded the alternative media, it was this concept that basically, well, it's all right, no kids died, it's all right, no children died, it's all fake, it's all nonsense, it's all make believe. And it's like, anybody that's been involved in any sort of aspect of like event management or putting on a play or acting or anything like that knows immediately, like, do you realize how complicated and difficult that would be? It would be far simpler to just kill a load of kids. And so it to my mind, that was injected into the sort of sphere of the alternative media. It's like a red herring. And it's like, what that serves to do is it sort of, again, it's that off the beaten track. This isn't the sort of thing that the normies would think. And you came across this, and you've been shown this bit of evidence and showing this bit of evidence, and before you know it, you're sort of convinced by this. And it serves to do several things, really. One, from an outside perspective, it's open to either ridicule or people thinking you're monstrous, because basically, you know, you're saying, oh my God, you're saying what, these kids didn't die? Okay, that's A, stupid, and B, just horrific. Like, you're not facing reality, which is another point that is actually part of this, is to move people away from reality and solid grounded facts and stuff like that, basically. But if they, and then the other point is that that controls the narrative of people who are interested in Sandy Hook. So if I was like, oh, I'm interested in Sandy Hook, oh, so you think that it's fake? No, I don't think that's fake. I think something else happened. But that's not the flavor of the month, is it? That's not what the alternative media want to hear at that point. And then the third thing that it does is it basically, it does a thing which is called colors the narrative. Basically, you've started with an assumption that this is what happened. And this is what's going on all the time now. People want to know the finish before they figured out what's happening. And then they backtrack and go, okay, fair enough. This must be this because X, Y, and Z. So with regards to, say, something like Sandy Hook, any evidence that falls out of that this is all made up and fake and stuff is immediately just dismissed. And isn't that quite convenient? So let's just imagine for a second that this was some sort of government thing, or like whatever, like, you know, or there was something that is in that doesn't match the official story. Okay, the people that have committed that crime benefit from the removal of reality into the investigation. Okay, and the people that, and it also paints these people in a very, very, very negative light. And again, this introduced to my mind this concept of what's called coloring the narrative, which is essentially, for one, the simplest way of saying it is basically it's red herrings. Like they're designing theories to put out there and control the conversation. Because if they've painted that picture of what's possible and what's up and what's down, and who the bad guy is and who the good guy is, before you even like get into this, it's like, you know, the most extreme example of this is Q, where it's like, right, what's this all about? And it's like, well, this is a secret intelligence officer, and it's like, well, so just give me the skinny. What's the like? Trump's a hero, pedophiles. Right, brilliant. Okay, cool. So I know what the end point is, and then someone will fill it in for me. You say, oh, well, what's the proofs? What's your breadcrumbs and stuff like that? That's not how you should do things. Like it's backwards, basically. And a lot of this is sort of happening with sort of the COVID narrative at the minute, basically. Like all these people basically, you know, repeating mantras from the alternative media, like, oh, it's never been isolated. Oh, no one has ever proved for it to exist. And it's like, you can check that in 4 seconds. Like you can literally just go on Google or go on Google Scholar and just put isolation of SARS-CoV-2, and like, you know, this is the point. You need to test your theories, and if your theory isn't right after a while, then what's the point of running with it? But here's the point of running with it, because for whatever reason, people are becoming invested in these things, and it's very complicated, Emily, because it ties into the sort of the personas and the way that people interact with each other is really a part of this, which is social media and the way that people behave, and the sort of adversarial arguments. And like, I know I want to talk, but like, you've got to, like, people don't debate, or they can debate, but like, it's not about learning, it's about winning. And it's not just winning for your sake, it's winning because you've got an audience, which is a really bizarre sort of like thing to be, because you're on your own. Usually you sat on your own raging away, but you've got this audience out there that are very aware. And this is the kind of, this is the sort of opposite end of the echo chamber effect, really, because basically you're judged by these peers. Like, I mean, I'm sure you know, if you've come out basically and said anything like, I don't think QAnon is real, you know, I don't think that Donald Trump is actually the savior. I actually think that COVID-19 is a real disease, and it's been very badly handled, and that's the actual scandal behind it. It's not, it doesn't fit what is the current, what's the word, zeitgeist? I don't know. What's the current flavor of the month? And for some reason, basically, and I think it's tied in with this social media thing, because there's a lack of nuance. There needs to be that bang, 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 bang answer right now. And because basically, again, people have got this audience, and so they feel a pressure to conform. that it just goes nowhere, and stepping outside of the expectations of your peers, no matter how gently, it's really jarring, because you're almost saying to people basically like, I'm going to jump in here, I'm going to jump off this cliff or whatever. Are you coming with me or not? Come on. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And this, do you know what I mean? Like it's very, this is the strange point about social media. It's incredibly reductive in social discourse. And the other irony is that basically, as I say, like it breeds this sort of echo chamber, this fear of your audience deserting you and stuff like that, to the point where it's ironic, like people bandy around terms like sheeple and brainwashed and stuff like that, and it's like, well, where did you get your information from? And like again, to sort of the point that I've been sort of rambling on about, it's basically like, for example, people say like, oh, where did you get that from? You've been watching the news, haven't you? Or you watch CNN, do you? You watch whatever or anything like that? And it's like, well, where did you get your information from? YouTube. Like, how's that source any better? Shouldn't we actually look at the information and see if the information is true? I mean, obviously, you've got to take on board like things like political biases and news media biases and business biases and stuff like that. But also basically, you know, you can fact check. And I think it's basically, it's quite interesting as well that there's really a sort of running theme at the minute through certain alternative media that, well, whatever the fact checkers say, whoever they be, well, it's obviously the opposite is true. And it's like, that's really not how it works. And again, I think that's part of this. It's building up this weird alternative fantasy where people don't quite know what's real and they don't know what's not real. Does that make sense? And it's all,
yeah,
it's all swimming around like that. And I think that is basically the mind control. It's not just Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica was specifically for sort of like selling elections. But there's dozens and dozens of like military and intelligence agency programs like Earnest Voice and JTRIG and SMISC and stuff like that. They've been openly saying this for years, if you've been looking in the right place, that basically, you know, they've been looking at how to control people's actions on social media and looking how to sort of like control people's emotions on social media and how to direct people in a certain way. I mean, and again, people are very savvy to this in the world of advertising. They know that basically if you say guitar, 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 you're going to get dozens of adverts for guitar mysteriously appearing on all your devices and stuff, almost as if they're listening to you, which of course they are. But again, we're not applying that to the broader things, like, you know, and again, it's not necessarily people's fault, because this is the mechanism. This is how it is sold to you. You don't poison somebody by giving them a lump of poison. You find out what the favorite meal is and you blend it into it.
Yeah.
Right. And this is the same thing. That what they've done is they've spent a good 5, probably 10 years looking at you and how you behave on social media and seeing what stories you react to and seeing what things make you tick. And this is why a lot of these things have got very, very noble causes, like, you know, we're fighting to free the underground children and stuff like that. You know, who can argue against that? Like, yeah. if only it were true, like, is the point. But this is the point. They've figured out that you think of yourself as a good person. Yeah. And these are the things that make you angry. And these are the things that make you excited. And these are the things that you're interested in. And what they're going to do is they're going to cater something that is basically just too good to be true. And they're going to shoot it at you. An example at the minute is this. It's nonsense. It's like basically like, oh, Donald Trump actually won the election. It's like, did he? That's odd, because he didn't, did he? Like, but you know, it's again, it's people struggling to let go of this concept, and basically like, yeah, it's dead straightforward. He lied to you. He lied to your face. That's where you're going wrong. All these people saying, well, look, Q said this, and like, but Q said this, and it's like, yeah, okay. It wasn't true, was it? That's the point, I'm afraid. It was all a lie. designed basically to make you chase your own tail. And it was incredibly successful.
Okay, so cool. You just said a lot of interesting things there. I'm going to like kind of circle back and kind of go through them and pull some interesting things out. So you talked about Columbine and
Yeah.
Virginia Tech, and I definitely know a lot more about Columbine than I do about Virginia Tech, although I know a good amount about both of them. When people, so Columbine was very weird. Like if people, you know, a lot of people who think they understand what was going on at Columbine haven't actually looked that deep. Like there's a level of weird there that starts to border on like Laurel Canyon or Manson, right? It's weird and it's incredibly complex. You can't come up with a 2-word catchy phrase about it. You can't do a 3-minute summary video on it or whatever for all your fans that depend on you to synthesize everything for them and whatnot, right? It's like the more I looked into Columbine, the more confused I was. Like, you know, and to me at this point, almost that's the sign that you've really looked into something is when you're able to say, I actually don't know, right? Like, you know, there's a tremendous power in saying you don't know, but that isn't satisfying to a lot of people. And I think that your point is well taken about the Sandy Hook thing, right? Like, so the Sandy Hook for me never caught like certain of these events I really am fascinated by, and that one wasn't one for me. And I would say the same thing in some ways about 9/11, although it is something that sort of woke me up on a different level. If you actually look into Oklahoma City, that one was a lot weirder on a lot of levels than 9/11. But the 9/11 gets all the attention and the Sandy Hook gets all the attention because sort of by then, based on people's responses to prior ones, they had figured out how, you know, the control mechanisms figured out how they could market it to do exactly what you're saying, right? To color the narrative and to create sort of like a politicization of the thing based on your you know, attachments. The one that was weirder to me at the time of Sandy Hook was the Boston bombing, right? Like to me, that one was much stranger. And again, when you started to dig into it, led to this place where you're like, Jesus Christ, there was a lot of fucking weird shit going on here. And just to say that it was fake is a vast simplification of actually like a very complicated and sophisticated blend of reality and fiction that was presented there. That, I mean, you know, like I think the better answer is, well, all this stuff was going on. You can find documented evidence of all this stuff, but in the end, I don't know what it means. Instead of doing what you're saying, that I know this was fake and therefore only showing people the things that are explainable as far as that narrative. And so for me, the Sandy Hook one felt almost like, get everybody really whipped up with this one because we have some other stuff down the pike that we don't want attention paid to, and everybody will be having this argument over nobody died, the children are all, you know, it just didn't grab me. But I think you're right in terms of like where this thing started to get really mimetic and weird is around that Pizzagate Q kind of time, right? Like and what happens with this kind of stuff, again, like the Q thing, I've been very hostile to the Q thing. You know, there are some oddities around it that are mysterious, but they're never the ones that people talk about. And it's certainly not like the one that gets all the attention, right? That people tweeting and whatnot about. Like, I mean, I got onto some very strange thread based on some information that shared with me about this sort of linguistic separation of the Q Celts and the P Celts that is fascinating. I don't know that it has anything to do with Q, but having heard this from somebody, that was actually an interesting line of research. But the stuff that people talk about, in my opinion, largely is so stupid, right? Like it's just so like, and it doesn't, like there are real things mixed in with that like if you isolated them from the rest of the mishmash, there's actually something there that maybe a difference could be made about. Like with the Pizzagate thing for me, like it's as like seductive and interesting as all of this crazy stuff around it is. Like the main topic for me was John Podesta, Hillary Clinton, all those people never said they weren't there, those weren't their emails, right? But that gets lost in the whole, right? You know, there was a lot of weird stuff said in the emails that is actually things that like maybe aren't as scandalous and interesting to talk about, but are evidence of crimes that should be prosecuted. Right?
But that's sort of missed, isn't it? Like, because everyone's like looking for the fantastic thing. And like, you know, like this is the thing, everyone's their own hero at the minute because like, you know, because everyone's living their life through social media. So you're like roving reporter, like, let me just spread the truth to my audience. And basically, like, this is why these narratives are so clever, because they basically are a way to paint you as literally as the hero in your own narrative. And yeah, this is the point. But again, you're right, Boston and that as well. It started these two trends. The second one was always there, but it became more prevalent. Basically, the one basically is crisis actors, which again I just never ever took as a serious thing, because it's just they kill witnesses, right? Okay, they kill people, they kill CIA agents who are involved in things so that they don't spill the beans. How are you going to rehearse with hundreds of people and stuff like that, and their families, and people that might have lived there and stumbled across it and stuff like that? What if it went wrong? Never once has there been like a live version of a soap opera or something like that that's been 100% right. Okay, but basically they're going to pull this off on such a massive scale. Where do they find the actors? What actor do you know? You live in LA, don't you? Yeah. Do you know any actors that don't want publicity or don't want praise for their role? No. No, they're not that kind of people, are they? Bless them. So it started this crisis actors nonsense, and this move away from sort of like reality and hard facts. Because to be quite honest as well, it's sexier and it's more interesting to look at this underground bases and people being not really dead and stuff than looking at the cold hard facts and saying, hang on, the police report says that they turned up at this time, but the CCTV says that it clearly shows there's a discrepancy in it, and like grinding out the sort of the minutiae.
Yeah.
Like, that's all gone because of the instancy of like social media. Like the part of research is sometimes reading an entire book, getting to the end and going, that was a complete waste of everybody's time. Didn't learn a thing from that, on to the next thing. But being able to dismiss that as this is a part of research, and people want that instantaneous thing. And the second thing, which became very, very prevalent after that, is people, the evidence is, I've looked at a picture or a video and it doesn't seem quite right to me. It's like, that's not evidence, right? That isn't evidence. That might be an interesting lead, but you've got to provide context. And if that is all you've got, literally that, well, I've looked at that picture, it doesn't look right to me, that's not good enough. But it kind of is at the minute. And again, this is the point. It's all tied in with this. Being fed stories, trusting sources rather than the information, and that sort of that need to be part of this group, not be ridiculed and not be like, cast aside by your audience. And all the time, again, you're basically playing this role. You're like super truther on the internet, and you're finding this, and you're like, oh, there's kids being sent in cupboards and like, all this crap, and it just. You get a bit close to it sometimes, and I'm sure we've all got mates that basically just like, come on, just pull back a little bit, right? Okay, just but again, the problem is as well that it's easier to find this stuff now. You don't have to send away for books. You don't have to write and get those lists. Remember those lists with the DVDs on that you used to have to write away and get? Like they'd send you some weird random one, and suddenly you'd find out about Freemasons or whatever. Whatever you want to find, you can pretty much find it straight away. But the market's saturated, and the problem with that is that more information doesn't necessarily mean better information. It's just that there's more noise, and again, one of the things that people forget as well is that basically you do these sorts of things like this is an enjoyment thing. Okay, we're puzzle solving. This is kind of what we're doing. A lot of people don't want to admit this, but the reason that you watch interviews like this and DVDs or whatever, Christ, does anyone watch DVDs, or am I massively out of date? Right, whatever. And when you watch this, it's because it's fun. It's because you're interested in it, because there's the level of enjoyment. Are you learning stuff? Yeah, maybe you are. Yes, you are, of course. But you're doing it because you enjoy it, and that's another aspect that has crept in with this, is the entertainment or the infotainment has reached the the alternative media. You know, there was always like, you know, Alex Jones was always a little bit WWE, but like that's an interesting way to chart it. If you look at sort of early Alex Jones, sort of his police state videos and stuff like that, it's facts, looking at the documents, actually checking stuff, admitting when he's got stuff wrong. And now it's just all bluster, because I think he got to a point. Well, I think lots of things happen with Alex Jones, which basically tie into this kind of with Cambridge Analytica. I think he was he was given money to promote certain Trump things, and you know, basically he was part of the Trump election. And for a time he was courting Steve Bannon, and I can't, there's no actual evidence of this, but if he didn't get a whacking great load of cash from Robert Mercer, I will eat my hat. Essentially what happened with Alex Jones was he went through an incredibly expensive divorce, got rinsed, and then all of a sudden InfoWars production values went through the roof, and they took a complete right turn. Now what's interesting and is that basically they're the sort of nodes that are sort of were spreading all this, you know, pro-Trump argument, and you know, Trump is different because he's not a politician and stuff like that. And they're just totally missing the fact that, like, well, yeah, but he's backed by people who are connected to the CIA. He's backed by people who are connected to MI6, for crying out loud. Like, there's an obvious, you know, it's a setup. He's not the savior, but for whatever reason, a lot of people sort of like bought into this, and it's because essentially all of that narrative was suddenly fed into places like InfoWars and places like Daily Caller and Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin and Candace Owens and Steve Crowder, and they all started, you know, cross-contaminating the alternative media, basically. Like, and what a lot of people don't know, or they probably know now but don't really care, is that basically, well, I mean, the political affiliation is obvious, or it should be obvious, but what a lot of people don't realize is that basically most of these people are financed by Koch Industries, or the DeVos family, or Nina Rosenwald, or so Rebel Media, so Tommy Loren and Lawrence Southern and Milo Yiannopoulos and Breitbart and Glenn Beck and Laura Ingraham and Tucker Carlson and all these people like that, as I say, Stephen Crowder and Candace Owens and Milo Yiannopoulos, all of these people like that who basically were purporting to be anti-establishment or anti-elites, or, you know, for the people. And it's like, you're not, though, are you? It's very obviously a propaganda arm of like very, very wealthy oil industrialists. And so, you know, it's just, that's basically how this sort of started to turn, because with the sort of the move towards Trump, lots of stories were injected, mostly anti-Hillary ones, like she's got cannibal disease and stuff like that, like Pizzagate and stuff like that. And they were all spread around this massive network that just so happened to sort of like basically become very, very popular, like the Blaze, like Rebel Media. InfoWars took a massive sort of like spending hike. Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin. At the time, you've got things like the intellectual dark web and stuff like that being heavily, heavily promoted. And this all, a lot of this came off the back of, but essentially, so this is wealthy people injecting the narrative into alternative media. And the problem is, again, by the time that somebody, no, you don't want to hear this. Nobody wants to hear that, basically, oh, you've been tricked. So people got very, very heavily into that. And it was also tied, again, it's tied into Brexit, like, which is, you know, the UK leaving the EU. And the reason basically it is because of these same industrialists, like the Koch brothers, through think tanks like the Heritage Foundation, the Adam Smith Institute, and the IEA and Institute for Free Trade. This is essentially what the whole Brexit and getting Trump in was for. I know this sounds like it's like, is that it? Like, there's no pedophiles underground? No, I'm afraid there's not. Well, there might be, but not in this story. It's all about a trade deal. This is what it is. When you look at a lot of sort of narratives and stuff like that, this is what it really boils down to. What's going on with Russia and the Ukraine and like America and stuff? It's about an oil pipeline. Yeah. It really boils down to as simple as that. There's a gas pipeline that they want to put through Syria, and there's an oil pipeline. Also, it's the other way around, actually.
The gas from oil.
Yeah.
Gas from.
And that's what it's all about. Like when it boils down to it, and you've got business interests trying to lobby politicians to get certain aspects, and large groups like the Atlas Network are basically setting up coups in Venezuela, and that's exactly what all this pressure against Iran's about. Iran hasn't done anything at all. It's basically to undermine Iran's oil producing capacity. And all of this is like, it's like they're messing it up. They're not messing it up basically so they're not a rival. They're messing it up so that the oil that they own is worth more. It's like the plot of Goldfinger. Like you destroy this so that basically yours is worth more. This is the thing. When it boils down to it, a lot of it is very, very complex, but for very, very simple outcomes, which is usually really, really wealthy people trying to make a huge amount of money. And this is just basically one of the aspects that they use to sort of like to allow that to happen, to foment this anti-EU feeling, to foment this pro-Trump feeling. They utilized these social media networks and just fed these stories into people, and basically like created this idea where you're on Donald Trump's side fighting the deep state. And it's just like these slogans, like that he used in his election campaign: drain the swamp, build the wall, fighting the deep state, lock her up. All of those were created by Cambridge Analytica, who basically ran his campaign. But those slogans were created in 2014. So they weren't pertinent to Donald Trump. He didn't come up with them. They weren't even pertinent to the time. Like, this is the point. They could have dropped those slogans anytime. They did the market research and said, this appeals to someone. If Hillary had ran on those slogans, she'd have won. Basically, is what they supported. And it's all because they found data. They mine your data. It's like, they steal your data from Facebook and Instagram. They look at what you're doing and what you're posting and who you like, and they can build a picture of you. And then they will bombard you with stories that tick that box for you. And again, this is what they've been doing, and so like building up this entertainment value of it, whilst also again putting you in as you're the intrepid reporter going out there and finding this out. And you're finding it yourself. No one's spoon feeding it to you, like obviously, like, but it's incredibly clever. It's very, very clever.
Yeah. So okay. So lots of stuff there. So with this whole, I want to hit some of the stuff that you talked about with sort of this right-wing alliance based around the Koch brothers and some of this stuff with the intellectual dark web. But I also want to go back to this with Pizzagate and QAnon was the first time that we saw people like really in the alternative media, like people who've been around for a long time. With the newbies coming in, you kind of expect it. Like we saw some people who should like definitely know better fall into not needing to see source information, right? Think about for how many years we would say to our friends who are not awake, can you show me the documents? I can show you the documents, right? And all of a sudden Q said became proof. Like who's Q? There's no Q, right? Like we don't know, everyone admits they don't know who it is, or some people think they know or whatever. But everything that Q, like when Q said, there's actually like he in one sentence, like there was, if this was a real like useful operation that was actually truly designed to wake people up, right? When he talked about underground bases, he'd have referred you to the work of Richard Sauter, who did work on underground bases, and truthfully what he found there, right? Like there actually are researchers who have spent years and years and years, many of them have lost jobs, lost their lives, whatever, researching child sex trafficking, pedophilia, all of this kind of stuff. There was never any, hey, why don't you go check this out, check this person's work out or whatever, right? There was never any like offer of like further education for the person who was supposed to, if you were a helpful, benevolent source, there would have been links to the documents, which we always required before, but suddenly people didn't require them anymore. And I felt like that was like a really interesting transition from where you had a place where you had people like, I'm trying to think of somebody who was like a really good early researcher on invading my mind right now on child trafficking, but we suddenly had like Jordan Sather was the authority on, right? Like it just doesn't even make any sense. Like I don't know if the person's ever written a paper, much less a book or anything like that. And this was also where, remember, I mean, we've all been getting our information from a lot, unfortunately, a lot from YouTube and podcasts for a long time now. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but we used to read books or read articles. And we used to even listen to podcasts without a bunch of visual stimulation. We used to like listen to long things. And now everything, even I find myself doing this. Like I struggle to have the attention to listen to a 3-hour podcast sometimes now, where I used to love it, right? And this is part of that design of like, well, you know, I don't need to look it up. This so-and-so said, you know, we all fall into it at times. I think that's interesting. But when you work, what you were talking about with this sort of alliance around people like Alex Jones, Candace Owens, Dave Rubin, like there's this really clever thing they've done in that all of those people like really did say one thing that was very satisfying for us to hear because it was true, right? No, there was no context provided, right? But they said something that like, it was satisfying to hear it say in such a brash way or on like a more public media place than our usual, right? So they said something and it felt good to it felt good, like, right? It felt good in some weird way. And so you kept listening because you wanted to hear them say that because that felt good in some way. But then because you're now listening to them talk for an hour on an interview show instead of just saying that one sentence, you're exposing yourself to all these ideas. And even though in your head you're still going, I disagree with everything else, you're still listening to it and it's becoming normalized. Like to me, the one thing that is evidence for sure that there's an alliance all being funded by the same thing is none of those people, of all of those people, and this includes people who claim that they're on the left or progressive, but part of the alternative dark web, the intellectual dark web, there's all of them are pro-Israel, right? All of them. How could it be that if this is really a diverse group of people who've all come together over common sense, no one has ever said like, it's pretty unfair what's happening to Palestine, or, you know, like this weird thing that it's, you know, like this weird Israel stuff, even if they ultimately disagree with it, just it's never even talked about. So when there's one or two topics that are either never talked about or always talked about by the same people, right? If all of, then to me, that was the evidence that there was something really weird going on where like they performed this exercise where, and lots of people fell for it, right? They appeared to like, you know, say something that was really off the plantation when really they only widened the margins by like maybe a centimeter. And you know how if you forget to save the setting on your computer, the next time you go back, the margins will be narrower again? That's actually what happened.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right. And so, you know, but people got a lot of satisfaction from hearing very powerfully in a very charismatic way, something that needed to be said, and then they let their mind get, you know, entrained with all of this other nonsense that sort of came along with it. And it's been really damaging.
Absolutely. I mean, again, that kind of, to me, there was a thing on YouTube, SJWs, right? SJWs is actually a thing. Like, you know, people that just basically just go far, far too far with it. But when that was happening, just prior to all these brave sods on the internet coming out and like, you know, the skeptosphere just going, hang on, aren't these people shrill? I always thought that's kind of a setup because none of these characters who none of us can remember now, like other than maybe someone like Anna Sarkeesian, what was her name? I forget.
Sarkeesian.
Like, do you know what I mean? Like, where are they now? Like, they're nowhere. Someone was controlling the algorithm to put these people in our face, and even people who are quite tolerant, like me, like, were going, "Oh, shut up! Oh, do shut up! Like, just what is wrong with you?" Like, and so when someone like, I don't know, Candace Owens comes out and said, like, or Milo comes out or whatever, and just like says something that's very hurtful, it's like it's exhilarating. You're dead right, okay. But something else weird was happening at the time. So, and you get swept up with them, and then you go along with it. And as you quite rightly say, they start to say stuff like, well, have you ever noticed? I don't know whether you've read the bell curve, but it's got some bloody interesting ideas. You know, crap like that. That's not my opinion. That's the stuff. Yeah. And so because you're now part of this club, and this club which empowers you and makes you like have a go at people and go, yeah, I don't care about your feelings. I've got facts, darling, and my facts are brilliant because I'm really intelligent. This bloke on the internet's really intelligent. I'm really intelligent because I copy him. And then basically you start to go along with them, and they'll start to introduce stuff like, well, why don't we just start saying 1488 just for the lulz, just to trigger the normies and stuff like that. And before you know it, everything's a communist takeover, which is the stupidest thing. This is the snarl word at the minute. Oh, you're enjoying your 6 months of communism. No, but you've never read it. You don't know what communism is. You've never read any Marx. You've never read any anything to do with any explanation of Marxism, any explanation of communism. You don't know the distinction between socialism and Marxism. You're basically repeating propaganda from really, really rich people. And why do you think really, really rich people would want to paint anything that's like just this far left of center as massively, massively extreme and to be avoided? Well, it's to stop them being examined too closely, and to stop them having to, put their hands in the pockets and like initiate programs that could get rid of profit margins on things that are human rights, like healthcare. And
water.
Precise. Better example than mine. Yeah, exactly. So you're getting swept along with all these people, and then you also had this weird thing where, as I say, like you've got Cambridge Analytica and people like that injecting stories. You've got these people talking about the stories, and you've got this next level of idiots on the internet, like Sargon and Styx and what's his wanker, and fucking all these idiots, like that these quasi intellectuals that basically just repeat the same shit because it becomes this echo chamber of, oh, aren't we so clever? Oh yeah, and no one else is thinking about this. No one else is thinking about this in quite the way. I'm not racist. No. I'm looking at things in a completely different plane. Now, was it connected? I don't know. But I don't know whether that you noticed this, but just prior to all of this and prior to all the SJW things, we got huge amounts of crap flooding the internet, basically saying, I don't know whether anyone's looked at the Second World War, but actually that Hitler wasn't quite the bad chap that they make out to be. Just bullshit like that. Just really like there was a real resurgence in was that stupid film that came out? It was basically like, yeah, this is crap. You can the greatest story never told or whatever. And like, and I tell you for why, right? Because two things, right? Okay, one, let's be honest, it's sexy to be a Nazi because it's a bit edgy and it's a bit dangerous and you don't take no shit, right? And the second,
and Hugo Boss designed their clothing, right? So
absolutely, yes, but and the second point is that basically you're superior just by existing. It sells you this concept, right? And then what does he do? He ties it in again to this thing, and using white nationalists is pertinent because basically you've got people like Steve Bannon, who's a white nationalist, Robert Mercer, William Regenery, and these are the people that are funding the Trump campaign, and these stupid groups like the Proud Boys and stuff. Proud Boys, in English, proud is a euphemism for having an erection. And boys are obviously children, so they're children with.
But why aren't we investigating them for pedophilia?
Quite like, well, honestly, that song that they've done is like, it's the most homosexual thing I've ever seen in my entire life. It's just so gay, like, and I don't like unintentionally. It's hilarious, like, but. Again, it sells you this idea that basically you're superior, you're part of it. And white nationalists is a good example of this because again, the Proud Boys and all these idiot groups, they don't think of themselves as the bad guys.
Right.
No, nobody ever thinks of themselves as the bad guys, right? Okay. Like everybody thinks that basically, even if their tactics are extreme, that basically they've been forced into this position by because their enemy is far worse than even they are. And a lot of this amazingly ties back to like the very sort of first sort of conspiracy theories that came out, like really like not really the first, but the John Birch Society.
John Birch, that's what I was just thinking.
And everything's a communist everything's a communist plot. And again, it basically just who was the founders of the John Birch Society? It's Fred Koch. and who was the other guy? Hunter Bunker Nelson, and all these other people. I forget exactly, but look into it. They were very, very rich conservative oil barons. Like, again, why do you think they might want to portray anything that's the slightest bit of progressive as Stalinist takeover, to the point where basically you're literally having things where, like, well, we can't give people free healthcare, because if you give people free healthcare, it's just a short step to the Holodomor then. And it's like, yeah, but it's not though, is it? Like, come on. Like, but again, it ties into this fantastical, like, oh, it's communism, Neil. It's like, what do you know about communism? It's evil. Why? Oh, because it's evil. It's like, I think you might have confused communism with totalitarianism. And were communist regimes totalitarian? Yes, they were. Do I want communism? No, not even a little bit. Like, well, maybe a little bit, actually, like a little bit, like healthcare and stuff like that. But, and maybe like abolish billionaires, because that's just a stupid concept. But again, it's this, rather than look at the fine detail and sit there and read Das Kapital, which is frankly boring, and or even watch, like, again, it's like you were saying earlier, this can't be explained in 3 seconds. You can't actually find out what communism is, like, and the myriad of different types of communism that there is within the system, like, without actually putting some effort into it. But it's okay, you don't need to, because we've got people on the internet who are telling you exactly where your place is. And the best way of explaining this, like, is that it's how advertising works, and it's how cults work. Yeah. What they do, they're telling you exactly how the world is, who's good, who's bad, what's up, what's down, what you should do, what you should look out for, and they're telling you your position in the world and what your role is, okay? And then they're surrounding you with like-minded people. That's exactly what cults do, but it's also exactly what marketeers and marketing strategies do. That's how you people are so like, oh, I love my Adidas shell toes, or I love my Volkswagen Beetle, or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's a product, but it becomes an extension of you, and it becomes psychologically comforting, because it offers you those things. And this is what is coming out with the basically like that people have fallen for a lot in the alternative media. It's offering you these things. It's telling you exactly what the world is. Right? It's giving you a position there, and it's surrounding you with like-minded people that tell you you're a genius. And it's a very, very powerful mechanism, and it's quite difficult to resist, unless, like all magic tricks, you can recognize it and go, oh, I see what you're doing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting to me. So all the things you said, like the alternative media is really good at going, all those left-wing ideas are bad, right? Yeah. Like anything that is not absolute libertarianism or absolute conservatism is there, right? But even with on the, like, the same thing has happened in terms of like 10, 15 years ago in the alternative community, lots of people were exploring various forms of anarchism, right? Like for me, like, and we're going to go deeper into this in the second hour, but the last time I participated in an election was 2008 with Barack Obama. I realized a few weeks after that how badly I'd been fooled, right? And I, over the course of the next few months, I investigated a lot of things. I flirted with the idea of libertarianism, but for me, it was that too much. Everything is about like entrepreneurship of everything, monetization of everything. That's the, like what it was not for me. And I found myself at like, okay, I like the idea of not a state, like of not, not use of force and voluntarism, right? But I spent some time looking at the various forms of anarchy and whatnot. Like it was, I looked into it, probably not as much as certain people who create, an entire dive into the philosophy, but I looked at it. Right. But some of those same people that were, and for me, I'm just kind of apolitical at this point. Like I think most of it is all completely nonsense. And, but I have certain values of mine that are considered more left. Some might be considered more, whatever. Right. But all the people that were investigating that other stuff and had said that they were outside of politics, 90% of them are now really just like, whether they're not, if they're, either they are Republicans or they associate themselves with that, because that's the lesser of two evils, and somehow Trump is going to save them from all the evils of the left without, like right now I'm having this, like, I'm listening to people who go, oh, it's all bad, but we have to, like, Trump is just going to save us from the less bad thing. I'm like, okay, let's just say that's true. But then you still have the problem of now we have Trump, we still have Trump, right? So it doesn't actually solve anything. And it's weird to me how people have just lost. And I think, I'm sure, and we can explore this in the second hour, the same in reverse can be said about people on the left, largely with some of the things that are going on. But, I guess in some ways, like, I don't have a lot of anger at Republicans because they never fooled me. I have some anger at the left because I was fooled. But right now I'm feeling like, I don't want to say necessarily like disappointed, or I have lots of people I love that I know personally in our community and whatever, but I'm confused as to like how what they're doing is any different than my dad says that Joe Biden is the lesser of two evils. Like, I don't understand how Trump is the savior, but Joe Biden is a lesser. The whole thing is bizarre to me, and like it does start to bring up like, okay, have we been participating in a cult for the last 20 years that we didn't understand that that's what it was, And just like any masterful programmer, they'll seed you with a bunch of things that are real and true. And very interesting, because people are, despite what we think, people are not idiots, and there has to be some grains of truth and some really important threads that they feel passionately about, right? But those have diminished. Like those deep truths that we found in 2005, 2008 that were really meaningful and caused us to do huge deep dives, like now they're called breadcrumbs or drops, and you blow them off your plate with the next meal. You know what I mean? And it's just on to the next one without like really understanding what the issue is about. And I think, the point about the cult nature of things and whatnot is it's up for sure for right now.
But doesn't that show you the genius of it, right? Because what it's done is politicized in quotes people that aren't interested in politics.
Yeah.
All these people that basically, are going to tell you that I'm a Republican, the Democrats are bad and stuff like that. You don't know anything about government. You don't know anything about politics. You don't know anything about their policies. You're not interested in their politics. Like, you just got on board with a slogan. And isn't that impressive? That basically what they've done is they've marketed a slogan, and they've literally turned the world upside down by saying that, like, Donald Trump, who had to audition in front of CIA-funded think tanks, whose members consist of the very wealthiest of the elite and some very dodgy far-right people, has been portrayed as like fighting the deep state. And it's like, put in by the deep state. Like, and it's just like, oh, it's amazing as well. Like the way that basically, again, everything's been turned on to make everything so incredibly hateful against people and stuff like that. It's just astonishing. Incredible marketing.
Yeah, and then this idea suddenly, like sometime over the last 4 years, the deep state has become the Democrat. It's a left-wing thing, like that.
Oh yeah.
Deep state of the left, yeah.
Yeah, we've forgotten about Skull and Bones and The Facts and Alan Dulles and like the fact that the CIA has been this close to being Nazi for basically like its entire like existence. Yeah. So we'll just ignore all that, will we, and just piss all that off. And basically, I actually did, like, when all this was flipping, I actually did a live talk. This was the last live talk I ever did. And basically this was when the Charlottesville March went off and people were saying this crap. And I was like, has everyone forgotten that basically, like, we're talking about Bush's connections to Hitler and Karl Rove's dad being a Gauleiter and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do you know what I mean? And all this sort of like, the Fourth Reich, remember that? Do you remember all this stuff? And then basically, like, then everyone just flipped around. It's like, yeah, but who told you this? Rich right-wing industrialists told you this. Like, do you not think that maybe they might be lying to you?
Yeah.
But it was sold with the most aplomb, basically. Like, so what can you do?
What can you do? All right. We're going to go over into the Patrons Hour where we're going to talk about what it's like to be a left-leaning conspiracy theorist, because it makes you a fish out of water in both places, right? And just some of the sort of difficulties and challenges that we face because of the politicization of the alternative community at this point. But before we go over, let people know where they can find your work and how they can support you.
Oh, just neilsandersmindcontrol.com. And I'm on Facebook if people want to have a chat and stuff like that. I'm usually quite vocal on Facebook. But yeah, neilsandersmindcontrol.com, and that's where you can get my books, and the books are there in PDF as well, if anyone's interested. And there's the blog on Cambridge Analytica, which is also the book, but you can either get a hard copy, you can get a podcast version of it where I'll read the book, so like an audio book, or you can just read it on the site. It's there for free if people want to read it, basically. So yeah, neilsandersmindcontrol.com.
All right, and I'm gonna hopefully have Neil back sometime in the near future to discuss his book on Charles Manson, because a lot of things overlap with a lot of the research that I've been doing ongoing about Chatsworth and what's really going on there. So,
well, I'm intrigued now. So yeah, I'll definitely come back.
All right, cool. So join us at patreon.com/offplanetmedia for the second hour, and we'll see you over there in just a minute. All right.